people who are, as they coin us, African American, but you truly are African.
Yeah.
Like, what's that transition like?
Nobody's going to remember.
Right.
That.
How many moves, how many promotions,
how many
right?
promotions you had, right? Nobody
Yeah.
even remember except you and your kids where you worked, right? But what they'll know is they'll see your kids, and they'll see your wife,
Yeah.
they'll see they'll see your community. The first time someone, called me the N-word, I was like, whoa, was he talking to me? You have to get to a place where your onlyness or otherness is not top of mind. Because if it is, it's always going to be a filter. Focus on your performance, the things that can be taken away from you, regardless of what color your skin is.
Yeah.
They can't take they can't take your performance away from you. They can't take your networking away from you. They can't take your executive presence away from you. None of those things can be taken away from you.
Right.
The lack of confidence for me, and not just, and I can name it now, I couldn't name it then. The lack of confidence has, creates all this doubt in my mind.
Oh, of course.
I'm the person that showed up and contorted myself to be a certain way.
Yeah.
And that broke me.
Welcome to Beauty and the Beast, where we create a safe haven for Black men to engage in deep conversations and share their journeys in a judgment-free space.
In each episode, we dive into topics that matter. This is a space where your story is valued, your voice is heard, and your journey is shared with others who, like you, may feel alone in the world. Let's break the myth that Black men are beasts.
Welcome to Beauty and the Beast. Let's start the conversation. Philip,
Yeah.
thank you for being here. I really appreciate you
Thank
taking
you for
the time.
inviting me.
Oh, no,
My pleasure.
absolutely. Any friend of Malik is a friend of mine.
Oh, that's great.
So I'm Kyle Vaughn, and you know your man Malik Baraka, and this is Beauty and the Beast.
Indeed.
And so we love the title because it gives us an opportunity to talk about just Black men in the world, and not only talk about the aspect of how we may be perceived, but talk about the beauty and how we are perceived as people.
That's right.
But as you walk us through your journey in life, we also like to talk about the emotional journey that is
right.
a part of the step 1, step 2, step 3, right? We feel like that's what makes our podcast special, as we delve more into the emotional aspects of
Great.
life.
Yeah. Malik and I have been talking about this for 3 months.
Yeah.
Longer than 3 months, right?
Yeah.
From the time, Malik and I
from
get together on a
inception.
regular basis since we started connecting.
Nice.
But the podcast in particular, I've been looking forward to this. So.
Oh, well, awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Let's dive in. So this is a similar question I like to ask all of our guests as we get started. And it's one, so I'm just learning who you are. But what I do know about you is that you are a husband,
Yes, sir.
you're a father,
Yes, sir.
you're a very successful business person in this world, now transitioned out of major media company here in Atlanta that I actually work for as well.
That's right.
Having said all that, and as that as the backdrop, what in your past set you on the journey you are on today?
So I was born in Ghana.
Okay.
I grew up in Ghana. I came to the States now 44 years ago.
Wow.
I came here to go to college. So you do the math, you can give a sense of how old I am, right? Old as dirt. But that's what brought me here. And my journey began in Tampa, Florida. Well, when I came to the States, I landed in New York.
Okay.
So I lived in New York and the DC area for a while. And then I started school in Tampa, at University of South Florida.
USF.
At USF.
Okay,
Yeah. You know USF?
I'm from Miami.
Okay. All right.
So yes, I'm familiar.
All right. Yeah. So that journey, finished college there, started my professional career, married 37 years ago. Married to my wife.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yes,
To my wife, Pam. We had 3 kids. And then we started the corporate reload thing, to 95 and 2000. We lived twice in Dallas, St. Louis, then Atlanta. But we've been here in Atlanta since 2001.
Okay.
I mean, most of my career, I've been a corporate guy for most of my career, but more so than the corporate thing. It's easy to let all your identity be driven by corporate life,
Yes.
right? And I will admit that I was that way. When you're sort of chasing the next promotion and chasing the next career, and but there came a point. At that point, came in probably 2005, 2006. When after all those moves, my previous employer, wanted us to move to New Jersey, and that's when I had a long trip to Ghana. I had to go. My dad was, sadly on his way out of this world, so I spent some time, back and forth in Ghana quite a bit in 2005, and when that decision came, do I pull out of Atlanta and move my family again to New Jersey? And my older daughter in particular was just at a place in her life, in her young life, that kids are resilient. I mean, she'd done okay, right?
Yeah,
but I just realized that the timing wasn't good. You know what I mean? And it wasn't because of some special wisdom or special knowledge, but it was just, sitting back and pausing and thinking, look, this is good for me, puts another check on my career, right? Another scalp in my, in my bag. But it's not all about me, right? And at the end of the day, 30 years, 40 years, when you look back, nobody's going to remember.
Right.
That,
How many moves, how many promotions,
how many
right?
promotions
Yeah.
you had, right? Nobody
Yeah.
even remember except you and your kids where you worked, right? But what they'll know is they'll see your kids and they'll see your wife.
Yeah.
They'll see they'll see your community. And so that was a realization that came to me that time, and and I chose to give up that company.
So because you said, right, you grew up in Ghana, and I'm curious about what that transition's like, right? Because, you got people who are, as they coin us, African American, but you truly are African who came to America.
Yeah,
like, what's
yeah.
that transition like?
We're all African Americans. We share the same DNA, right, in many cases. And so I like to think of it more as, American-born African Americans and African-born African Americans, right? The only difference between us is, maybe we're different tribes. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
If you grew up in Africa,
Yeah.
like, in Ghana, for instance, I'm of the Ewe tribe, right, in southeastern Ghana. But, there are Ga, there's Fanti, there's Ashanti, there's Dagomba, they're all part of this country. It's a relatively small country of, 30 odd people. Right? So this is more of a tribal thing. Transition, was interesting. You hear this stereotype of, African-born African Americans and U.S.-born. That there's some tension between us, and so forth. And every stereotype, of course, has a small kernel of truth in it, right? So there's that. And I think the driver for that is, most Africans who come here have a purpose, right? We're here to get an education, and very often get that education, live a few years, make money, and then go back home.
Right.
So that's one. And because of that particular driver, they tend to be a little bit, blinders on, right? And don't recognize some of the other issues that some of our DNA brothers, right, might face, right? So that's the first one. The second one, I think, we don't have a little bit of the historical baggage, right? Great word. Yeah, right. We don't have some of that, and so again, and speaking for myself, right? You walk in, and when you hear, when you start to meet people, and you hear, some of the talk, it doesn't resonate. You don't get it, right? I say that because I want to share, when it started resonating with me here in a moment. Before I get into that, I'll give you an example. So at USF, in the early 80s, often I'd go into the student union, and the school at the time, I don't know what it's like now, but the school at the time was a very small minority of black students, right? So I go into the student union, and the black students would always be, sort of by themselves in the corner. They didn't mix very much, even in the dorms, they were by themselves. It was just, and I had friends, and I have to admit, it kind of frustrated me a little bit, right? Because I just didn't get it.
Right.
I mean, I totally did not get why that was the case.
The isolation.
The isolation.
Yeah.
Right? And it took me years until, Milik and I were talking recently. I told him about this book that I read called The Warmth of Other Suns,
Okay.
right? By Isabel Wilkerson. That book completely opened my eyes, right? That book on the surface is about sort of the history of the Great Migration, right? And it follows the path of, 4 different individuals, from different decades as blacks move from the Jim Crow South, escaped Jim Crow,
Yep.
and moved to the
north
to the north
Yep.
and to the west,
Yes.
right? And when I was reading that book, it finally clicked that those kids who were sort of sitting off to the corner, were born right after Jim Crow or in Jim Crow, and certainly their parents
They've experienced Jim
experienced
Crow.
Jim
Yeah.
Crow.
Yeah.
Right? And so if by the early mid 80s, for those kids, those were not, they're not things they write in books.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? These were the conversations around the Thanksgiving table, the Christmas table. You remember when Uncle so-and-so happened to so-and-so? Remember when, these were stories. These were family stories. And it's no wonder that they would look on everybody else with suspicion, right? So since that book, and I've read a lot of books about just the South. It's just something I'm very interested in. One of the 2 most recent ones I read were primarily about a sheriff in North Florida called Willis McCall.
Okay.
If you don't know about him, you should go read about him.
Okay.
Just go Wikipedia
Okay.
him. I won't get into a lot of detail about this man, but he was an awful human being.
Okay.
Okay. And the places where he did a lot of the stuff he did, you've read about the Groveland Four and all of those things, that was all about Willis McCall.
Okay.
Right? I knew people when I was in college who were from those cities.
Yeah.
Who are from Eustis, Mount Dora, Tavares, Lake County, Florida.
Yeah.
Right? There's a guy who refused to desegregate long after the Supreme Court said segregation was
Right.
over, right? And every time I read that, I always think about these friends of mine who are like, so all that's long answer to a short question, right? It's until, and I've got a lot of friends who are here with me who would say the same thing. Until we, who were born in Africa, sort of crossed that chasm, right, to have a better understanding of the history of our DNA brothers, right, that divide will always be there. I think similarly, when U.S.-born African Americans go over there, I was just talking to Monte about this, right? When they go over there and see those people in their environment, and hear the languages, and hear and maybe even go to Elmina Castle or Cape Coast Castle or Goree or some of those places and see the door of no return and all those things, right? That too, that divide stays open. But the more we understand each other's experience, the divide closes.
So this is interesting. This is very, very interesting to me because for me, right, my mother is from Turks and Caicos.
Okay.
And she's mixed. You know, my grandmother was white, Dominican white. My grandfather was from Turks and Caicos, but has the British accent from the British colonialism and whatever have you. And then through some marriages, I have family that's from the Bahamas and whatever have you. And for me, I have more of an affinity for the Caribbean than I do for Africa.
Sure.
And I just, you know, there are times when I think about that and wonder if there's something wrong with me because I feel that way. And I don't, right? I mean, I don't feel that way. I mean, but it's especially growing up.
Sure, sure.
But I mean, it's interesting to hear you talk about in terms of the gap, because now you've got the middle passage, like the stop. You had some stops in the Caribbean, you know, before the ship went on, or its destination was the Caribbean, and other destinations were the U.S. And so I just would love to hear your opinion about that chasm, because what's interesting about what you're saying is similar things exist as it relates to Caribbean Americans as well, in terms of that gap. And I feel very similar in that as an example, right? Like I said, I have through marriage family in the Bahamas too, and people like to use terms just like they say, "Have you been to Africa?"
Yeah,
they say the same thing. Have you been to the Bahamas? And inevitably, what people will say is, like, "Yeah, I've been to Nassau." But let me stop you.
That's right.
Do you realize that the Bahamas is like literally thousands of
islands,
small keys and islands?
That's right.
So for you to say you've been to the Bahamas and you equivocate that to being in Nassau, Bahamas, I'm like,
On a resort.
On a resort, right? I'm like, you've not been to the Bahamas.
That's right.
So I'd love to hear your opinion about just that whole, and I know I've said a lot, but that whole chasm that exists not only for, you know, America to Africa, but now you've got the Caribbean as a whole dynamic as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the difference might be this. It's a question of minority majority, right? If you go to the Caribbean, they're majority black countries.
Yep.
Right. You know, if you go to Africa, they're majority, obviously, you know, black countries. And so I think that's the similarity.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, the Caribbean experience in some ways was not dissimilar in terms of people being taken away from their homeland and enslaved on the islands. But I think post-slavery, you know, what happened in those places and the fact that they now, you know, they've been able to sort of control their own destiny for a long time. I had a friend here years ago, Andrew Jackson. If he's watching this, Andrew, hey, I've been out of touch with him for many, many years, but he and I were talking, you know, this probably, we both lived in Tampa at the time, then he moved here probably 30 years ago. We're having this conversation similar to this. And he had just gone to Jamaica for the first time, right? And he told me that his experience in Jamaica brought him to tears because it was the first time in his life that he had been to a place where everybody in authority looked like him. Policemen, prime minister, the judges, the newspaper readers, everybody looked like him. And it was a very different experience for him. Right. So I think that's probably why there's that, you know, U.S., you know, Caribbean, U.S., Africa.
I hear, when you say that, I hear empowered versus disempowered.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. What's interesting is for me is that how I sit within the space of this conversation is, like Kyle, I have Caribbean roots as well. But I feel like that is a part of my heritage, but it is not the culture I was reared in. Mm-hmm. And so I very much identify as Black American, if we could call it that, right? Mm-hmm. Where I know that originally my people were from Africa. They made the pit stop, right, in the Caribbean, and eventually made their way over. And the stories that were shared, the culture that was passed down was very much, and we've talked about this before, the culture of what we now know to be assimilation, but what we thought was integration, right? And trying to fit in into what felt like the most powerful seat in this new society, not knowing that, oh shit, they were giving up a lot of their power.
That's right.
Because they were giving up a lot of their culture.
That's
they were
right.
giving a lot of their heritage up. And so it is an interesting place for me to sit, to have such strong Cuban roots, for example, but speak no Spanish.
Yeah.
But know nothing of that part of my heritage.
Yeah.
I do. So let's talk about the, I guess, emotional journey that is making that transition from Africa to the U.S. Like so you talked about being on the campus of USF, or University of South Florida, and you seeing the stark separation. So, and you talked about the frustration of that. I mean, okay, so there's that, right? Now, the company that we all share in common, there's a lot of that happening in those halls as well, where there's a lot of separation, in terms of on my own time, I'm going to go sit with the people that I most relate to. So how do you, so let me say this, because what I've seen about my family who have gone to college and are from the Caribbean, they seem to be more at ease intermingling with all races than the people who were born here. So I'm just curious about your experience. And now, what does that look like for you emotionally? Like, you're like, where do I fit?
Yeah. No, that you're absolutely true. I think, people like myself are indeed more comfortable with all races, right? There was an interesting that happened. So, when I got to USF and I was, trying to meet people, make friends, and so forth, one of the first group of people I met were these they're white kids, right? And so through one conversation or another, they invited me to join a fraternity. Well, fraternities were new to me. I didn't know anything about fraternities. Yeah. I just knew, okay, these guys are my friends, so I'm going to go hang out with them. Well, it was an all-white fraternity that was trying to integrate.
Were you the token?
Right?
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, my friends, my Black American friends, were like, what the hell? Why you can be their friends, but you can't be their brothers. Right? I mean, that was literally a quote somebody said to me, right? Yeah. Which is confusing, frustrating, so on and so forth, right? Because for me, they were all just friends.
Yeah.
People I liked, right? And the final straw was I went to so I hadn't committed to the fraternity yet, but I was invited to play in an intramural softball game. And I won't mention the fraternities, but I was with this, all-white fraternity except me, and we were playing against a Black fraternity, right? And I felt like, man, the daggers I'm getting from the dugouts were like, right. So, after that, I was just like, you know what? It's fine. I'm not interested in any fraternities. I didn't join either one of them, right? I just, I get that. But yeah, so for me, I've never really had. I've been very comfortable, either way. Like, if you grow up in a post-colonial, African country, you're probably very comfortable with, because it's a melting pot, right? The Brits are still there, right? Not so much anymore, but,
right.
At the time they were there. I mean, but there were Syrians, there were Lebanese, there were Jews, there were people from all over the place, right? Who were all in our world Ghanaians, Indians, right? I mean, and so schools that I went to were very diverse, the modern term, right? Very diverse schools. And it was not anything you ever got up thinking about, right? And so, so over the years, I've always felt, somewhat comfortable in so-called white spaces, a lot of us, Black Africans would tell you, we didn't know we were Black until we came to this country, right? The first time someone, called me the N-word, I was like, whoa, was he
talking
to me? It was a Sunday. Wow. It was after church. I was stopping at a fast food place to get lunch.
Yeah.
And I was, parked, I was walking in, and there was an older gentleman and what I assume were his 2 young adult children walking out of the restaurant. So, as you would do, I smiled, made, eye contact. And the dad had said to his kids, "What's that looking at us for?" And they kept going, and I stopped, I looked, and then I said, "Wow, did that just happen?" Right. So that happens.
Yeah.
Right. I've had that experience, like a lot of Black Americans, not many.
It's amazing how that sticks with you, though.
But it sticks with you, right? This is a thing that happened before I got married, right? I've been married for 37 years, right? I'm still single. But over the years, my wife is white, right? We've been married for 37 years in the South. She's from Alabama, right? And
talk about daggers coming your way.
Yeah, right. And other than maybe a couple of incidents, it's been largely, it's fine. My kids, who call themselves Half-Africans, right?
Love it.
One of them, in any case, are, so they're mixed race. They're very, they're very comfortable in their skin.
Yeah.
They've got friends, got Black friends, they've got, white friends. So, at least in my experience, and I don't think it's unique to Africans, African-born, African Americans. I think there's just, because we didn't have the Sheriff Willis McCall experience.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Right. That you're not, well, what I find interesting about this, and you just took me back when you talked about, kind of like growing the spaces that you grow up in and what you're comfortable in. And I think for me, I've coined the term for me personally about feeling othered. And what's interesting about that is you talked, I reflect back to my youth and spending time in the Bahamas, and it was almost like a switch would get flipped when I would get off the plane.
Code switching.
And it was a whole different level of code switching now that we talk about this, because it wasn't that I code switched in terms of how I talked. And sure, there was accents here and there, even though the people who were from there would be like, "What kind of accent is that?"
That's
and then when you're back home, they were like, "What do you sound like?" Yeah. But my point, where I'm going with this, is that when I was in those spaces, that was either in Turks and Caicos or in the Bahamas, it was nothing to interact with people of different races.
That's right.
And be comfortable and have friends and even family. Like you just took me back, and I was like, wait, I did have some white family in the Bahamas. And it was just, that's just what it was. It was no big deal. But then when I came back, it was like separate, right? It was just like, and to your point, I'm wondering if it's like when I was in those spaces and when I was there, I wasn't suspicious of those folks. Yeah. Versus when I'm back home,
right.
Now I have some suspicion for folks. It's just like, so I'm just gonna stick to my corner and you stay over there, because I don't want to be a part of whatever you got going on. But it just, the whole other thing. So sharing that, being in the spaces you've been in corporate America, how did it feel to be the only one in the room? Because I know you were.
Yeah. I had a mentor early in my career. guy named Gene Lloyd. Gene's still around. Great guy. Gene, when he and I first met, and he started, sort of giving me guidance and so forth, told me this that I've never forgotten. He says, I don't like to call us black people. I call us unique people.
Okay.
And the reason, and I hope I can do this justice, because again, this is decades ago, because his reasoning was that, one, uniqueness is empowering, number one. Two, uniqueness, if you understand it and embrace it, can actually be a positive differentiator, right? And the whole point is to walk into, these spaces with confidence, right?
There's that word again.
And so, over the years, as my own career progressed, like every career, it goes up, it stalls, it comes back, it goes up, and there were many times where I was, one of the onlys, in the room. You have to get to a place where your onlyness or otherness is not top of mind. Because if it is, it's always going to be a filter, right? You want to go into those spaces and be who you are, a member of whatever leadership team you're a part of, and you're here to do a job, and you do that job, you perform, you lead, you drive decisions, you raise your hand, and all of those things that you hear about that make for corporate success. You have to be able to do that and put all the other stuff behind you. Right?
Go ahead.
So if I may
go ahead.
jump in here, I hear that, and I overlay that with my observation of you over the years in the workplace, right? From our time at Cox together, Cox Enterprises. Let me be very specific.
We're not talking about the places that we worked at.
But you're right. But because I said the name, I had to say the whole name because I couldn't just leave it halfway. That's my issue. At any rate,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
The point of that is, I hear you when you say you have to leave that othering, out of it, right, and just move through the space with confidence and power. But I also simultaneously observed you showing up very black, and by that I mean you were very intentional about how you coached, mentored, hired, what organizations internally you invested your time and energy into.
Sure.
Right? So there was very much still a very strong definition or attachment to that cultural identity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you are absolutely right.
Yeah.
Because it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It is what it is. And, the fact that by whatever, my own performance and every corporate career is a combination of, what you bring to the table and opportunities that sort of come along the way, right?
Yeah.
The fact that those things sort of worked in my favor and got me to where I got to doesn't really negate the fact that, it's all of us as human beings to, sort of reach a hand out, right?
Yeah.
And bring back with us, So yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there are many instances, and I won't go into those details here just because it's not that important, that I had to be the black leader and call certain things out.
Yeah.
Right? And not because the people that I was calling them out against were necessarily racist, but they were unconsciously biased.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that's one aspect of it. Second aspect of it are the more formal things like, the diversity councils, some of those things, right? Yes, absolutely. I tried to play a significant role in that because, again, there weren't very many of us, right? So if we didn't, then there'd be no voices at the table, right? Mentoring, you mentioned mentoring. Mentoring has been and remains still a really, really critical part of my own makeup. Is what I believe. My legacy when I'm done with this world. This year, I started this mentoring circle for 5 fantastic young men. African-American men under the age of 30. One of them is my son, Evan. He's 26. And then there's, 3 other guys who are just, all of whom I met at various times in their college, right? One of them was a summer intern for me. When I was looking specifically, I told my recruiters, I want an African-American man,
Right.
preferably to be my summer intern, right? I got to a point in my career where I could do that.
I was gonna say, where does that courage come from? Because
you get to a point in your career. I got to a point in my career where I could do that, right? So his name is Nick. He came in. It was a summer, and he wasn't just a token. He was awesome. It was great. It was a great summer intern. Then another one I met at Morehouse College. I went there on a speaking engagement, and he was a senior at the time. Just impressed the hell out of me. He and I kept in touch, and he's his late 20s. He's part of the group. He's a banker in the Atlanta. They're doing very well. Third one was another co-op, again, at Cox. Ended up on my team. And then the fourth one, the fifth, including Evan, is the son of a very good friend of mine.
Okay.
But when we get together when we meet once a month, right? We meet for an hour and a half, a couple hours, and when we get together, our conversations go to pretty much what we're talking about here, right? Which is, yes, you're Black. You can't forget that. You can't run away from that. It is what it is, right? That comes with its own, opportunities and challenges.
Yeah.
But it also, going back to Gene Lloyd's words, also you're unique, right? So remember that, and focus on your performance, the things that can be taken away from you, regardless of what color your skin is.
Yeah.
They can't take they can't take your performance away from you. They can't take your networking away from you. They can't take your executive presence away from you. None of those things can be taken away from you.
Right.
Right. So you focus on those things, and in some senses, put on the blinders. You can't forget where you came from, but when you're in the corporate space, eyes on the prize.
So we've had a litany of guests from different walks of life on this podcast, and a bunch of them are very accomplished. And what I have seen as a common thread is that they are comfortable in their skin,
100%.
including you, right? And that. So my next question is about that, right? Is you talked about mentoring, right? And I've had mentors over the years, but I don't think we ever had that conversation, right? I don't think we ever had the conversations about when you're in these spaces, right? And this is something that is almost like an epiphany for me, is if you're going to go in these spaces and be the other, then you better be confident and you better be comfortable in your skin. And I don't think that we don't have those conversations like with people, and I'm hearing you do that with your cohort. But I mean, how important do you think that is when you are the only
It's-
person in the room?
It is critical. You know, I was fortunate, the mentors that I had, when they were getting me into either opportunities and so on and so forth, they didn't talk about, you know, you're going in there as a black man or whatever, right? I mean, they were coaching me on how to speak, how to dress, how to show up, right? What do your results look like? How are you delivering on your commitments? Those were the conversations that so what that puts in your mind is, you know, besides, you know, I had another great mentor who when I was again at another company before Cox, same thing. I mean, he was, you know, I remember he got me into one presentation with, you know, the most senior people at this company, right? I went in there nervous as a cat, you know, and did I do great? I did okay, you know, in the presentation, right? Because I was so nervous. I was way out of my league. And when I came out and I asked him how I did, you know, he didn't sugarcoat it. As well, you know, you could have done better. As a black man, right? And I think that's what we have to do for each other, right? Yes, you know, you have a background. Yes, be comfortable in your skin, but help each other get better.
Right.
That's what it's about.
So if I may,
Yeah.
I have to take this moment to give you both your flowers. And this is almost a surreal moment for me. Having both of you here in this space, on this platform at the same time. Because, you know, as some of the audience may recall from a previous episode, our relationship started with you being a mentor for me, and then it evolved to us mentoring each other, to a friendship, and now co-hosts giving back to others what we've been able to richly give to one another. Philip and I started in a similar way, where Philip became a mentor of mine after a chance meeting where I was filling in for another recruiter that was responsible for his rec. I had the intake session with Philip, got the information, passed it to the recruiter when they came back, and that was the only official meeting we ever had. But the energy was so rich, and the connection for me was so immediate. I was like, bro, I gotta meet with you. I gotta tap into you again. Like, let's just do lunch. Like, before I actually said, hey, B, you know, my mentor, like, it started with a lunch and it just grew from there. And
I don't think we ever even said the word mentor.
we never really even said it, right?
Right.
So
It's all organic, right?
It grew from there, and it also bloomed into a friendship. And the reason it's so important for me to name this is because I want to give y'all your flowers in public, because you're both so instrumental in who I've grown into as a leader, as a father, as a husband, as a man. And, you know, what you said about it's our responsibility, you know, to do that. Like, everybody don't lean into that. And some people don't even know how. But y'all have done that for me on such a profound level, man. And I just wanted to thank y'all for that and tell you how much I love y'all, man.
Oh, thank you.
too,
It's
bro.
mutual, man.
Yes, same here.
mutual.
Same here. And real quick, so we've talked a lot about mentoring. We talked about mentor-mentee relationships. We've talked about fostering performance in others and pushing them to be better. And we'd love to hear about your experiences in life as it relates to those topics. So please engage with us on our social platforms, especially on Instagram, Beauty and the Beast 2025. We'd love to hear about your journey as it relates to those topics. So we were just talking about mentor-mentee relationships. We were talking about confidence. We're talking about having that confidence when you show up in these spaces and you're the only one. I kind of want to delve into that a little bit more and talk about a time you may have found yourself in a situation where you weren't sure of yourself. And then how do you go from that to this very confident person that you're mentoring others to have that same level of confidence?
That's a great question. No, I wasn't always like this. I'm actually by nature very introverted and was actually a painfully shy kid. As a child, I was painfully shy. And, some of my old friends will tell you that, right? Then at some point, early in my career, I was invited into a sort of a hypo situation. I had the opportunity to
Hypo meaning?
high potential.
Yep. Just for the guests, I'm not sure if they knew what that meant.
That's right. So I took one of those corporate personality things. I don't remember which one this was, but and when I was done, I met with my coach, and he was reading out the results to me. He had all the positives, and then he said, "But by the way, you sometimes you tend to be a bit of a wallflower." Really? What do you mean by that? Well, he said, well, I bet you, sometimes when you go into these spaces, you probably just sort of hang out on the periphery, and he was right. He was absolutely, because of my natural shyness, right? That was the way it came out, and so I had to make the decision, right? Personally, that okay, am I going to be that guy? I could be, I'll be fine, right? Yeah. Or if I had these, because the message to me was, if you have these, aspirations, the wallflower isn't going to get it, right? And so some of it was, we have a statement in Ghana called "Aitron." So it's kind of the, strong eyes, right? Which is like, where sometimes when there's a situation where you're not fully equipped for, you just do it.
Strong eyes.
Right?
Okay.
So strong.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of the patois. It's what it comes from, Pidgin English, right?
Yeah.
So, I just made a decision at that point that, hey, when there's the next cocktail party, just wade in. What could go wrong, right? And so I just did little by little. Doing that. I mean, over the years, I've had executive coaches, who have just, because it's still my gravitational pull,
Right.
Even to this day, right? I would rather go and sit with a book in a corner and be by myself, than to go to a party any day of the week,
Right.
Yeah.
right? That's just my that's just my personality. But these coaches, like, okay, I mean, if you can't be like that, right?
So talk to me about how you then convey that being confident or comfortable in your skin to people you mentor. Like, how do you get them over that hump? And I think for our guests, like, they might be interested in hearing, like, what are some of the things that you are telling those folks how to, right? Because I can imagine early in your career when you don't know anything, you won't be so confident in the room.
No,
But now you have tools.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of learn by doing. I mean, sometimes you learn by doing, especially in the corporate world, right? I mean, there's just, because some of what we're talking about here are soft skills.
Yes.
Right? I'm a big reader, as you've probably picked up on. I read a ton, and I've read a lot of books about different things. And you read about executive presence, and you read about how to stand on a stage and speak to people. And,
Political savviness.
You're right, networking and play the political game and all of those things.
There's that game.
But
Sorry.
until you actually go and play the game, you know, you don't really learn it, right? So, you know, so when I'm with my all my mentees, you know, over the years, and especially these young guys that I'm connecting with these days, you know, we've got a book we're reading.
Okay.
Right. So
And,
it's a
and that book is?
and that book is Good is Not Enough is the primary title. The subtitle is Strategies for Minority Executives, or something like that, right? It's by a guy named Keith Wyche,
Okay.
right? W-Y-C-H-E. The book was written in the 2008, 2009. Still very relevant today, right? And so he goes into a lot of stuff about, you know, networking and executive presence and performance and all of those things. And the common denominator of, and I just started it, common denominator of all of those is you learn by doing. So what I would say to, you know, anyone who is,
Speaking to the camera.
anybody who's struggling with this, you know, read the books. You know, there's certain skills, you know, individual things that you have to do, right? But there's no substitute for jumping in and demonstrating confidence. If you have to go to a company party, you know, sometimes you get these invitations to company parties.
Sure.
Oftentimes, like I used to do, wouldn't go because they weren't mandatory, right? Go to the parties. Go to the parties. Wade into the conversation. Shake hands. Meet the right people. Introduce yourself. And when it, you know, then, and over time, it becomes, you know, it's muscle memory.
Yeah.
Right? It's muscle memory. Over time, you know, it won't seem like such a foreign thing. And at some point when you're, look, the first time anybody has to get on stage, you know, the research says people are more afraid of standing on stage than they are by dying. Right? Any of us, the first time you have to stand on stage and give a speech, it's the scariest thing that, you know, I mean, your voice modulation goes down, you're sweating, you're weak in the knees. Yeah. But you do it a few times and it becomes okay, right? And so so there's no secret, at least from my perspective, right? And it's something that took me years, you know, years. I mean, there were still, you know, even toward the end of my career, I mean, there were, you know, sometimes I would go into an environment and I would have to, okay, all right, let's go.
Build yourself up. Build yourself up.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, and you got to go in and you got to play the part. And I'm, you know, some of my most respected executives are super shy people. And I know that for a fact. Are introverts, but you would never know it because who you see is Mr. CXO.
Right.
Miss CXO.
Yeah.
Right? You know, early in my career, I used to I used to hide the fact that I was an introvert. You know, remember we had a group thing one time, you know, one of my VP took his whole team to a thing and they brought a guy in and he did this assessment of the group and, you know, all the popular kids, you know, all had, you know, they were all, this is the disc profile, right?
Yes, I remember.
So they were all the Ds, right? You know,
The drivers.
they were the drivers, right? And when I took the test,
We know.
when I took the test, you know, I came out, I think I was a C.
Yeah.
And I was very embarrassed that I was a C. Right?
What made you embarrassed?
Because the popular kids, the guys who were and the gals who were destined for good things were all the Ds. Right? You know, because, you know, felt like you have to be that extrovert to be considered a leader. Right? And frankly, I mean, not that maybe this says something, maybe it doesn't, but if you just want to judge by sort of where careers ended,
Right.
The C guy who was embarrassed about where he was actually ended up exceeding some of the D guys in their careers.
We can burn out. The D's can burn out, I can tell you that.
Because, my point is not about that.
Right.
It's really not about that, right? It's really about, what you bring to the table,
So talk about the embarrassment, right? I'd love to hear that, because I think that's part of what people really need to hear is like, how do you get past that embarrassment? One, why'd you feel embarrassed? And kind of delve deeper into that. But how did you get past the embarrassment? So why, and then how do you get past?
Well, the embarrassment was simply because, the guy who was leading the class, when he was sort of, when we had all taken our tests, he had us all on the wall, with the groupings. Okay, here are the D's and all the names, and then the I's, the S's, and the C's, and he was describing each, And those of us who were in the C, it's like being in the playground when they're picking teams, and these 3 or 4 guys are and gals are the last to get picked for any of the teams, right? So it was a little bit of that kind of feeling. You know what I mean? And I remember he went on to give the example of some of the leaders, the chiefs in that organization were all D's, So I came out of that and felt like, okay, maybe I'm still that wallflower, right? Maybe I'm really, they don't see me as a potential, or not that they don't see me, my personality, right, is not cut out for.
Because it doesn't feel like you fit that mold.
That I fit that mode, right? And if I'm not a D, and I was never going to be a D because that's not the way I'm wired, right? I tried to be a D at some point.
That had to be exhausting.
That is exhausting because that's just inauthentic.
Yeah.
Right. And so the advice I'd give to anybody is be yourself. Be authentic. Be yourself. And what matters when you have your job and your team or whatever it is, do it to the best of your ability. Yeah. In an authentic way with your personality, and you'll be successful.
Before did you want to jump in on anything? I don't want.
No, please.
Okay. So one of the things we've talked about with other guests is you brought up the term "be yourself" and "be authentic," and one of the things we've talked about with other guests is this notion of wearing a mask. And I know a lot of us in our careers feel like we have to wear a mask and we're this person. Like when we walk in the building, we're one person versus when we walk out. Like, what's been your experience with that? Have you ever felt like you've had to wear a mask? And if not, what do you tell people who feel like they do have to wear a mask?
I mean, to an extent, you have to wear a mask.
Okay.
Right. When you that if you want to call it a mask.
What would you call it if it's not a mask?
Well, it's I don't know what the right word is, but let me explain it. That maybe there's a word that comes along with it, right?
Sure.
I'm that introvert, right? I'm a man of faith, all of those things, But when I walk in the doors of my employer, that's not the first thing they see about me or they care about me, right? When I walk in the door, any company, all they care about is we have a revenue target and a margin target to achieve, and you have a title, get on with it, right? So, you have to put on whatever that is. It's a persona, right? More so than a mask. The place where I think we get in trouble is if the performance of our corporate responsibility and our personality start to clash. that's not a good situation.
So say that again.
When the need to perform, what the company wants you to do, because every 2 weeks,
Yep.
they give you
That's
a
the
check.
contract. Yep.
That's a contract, right? They give you that check, and they expect you to behave in a certain way to achieve those goals, and the persona that you left at the door when you walked into the building are in conflict, then that's never a good situation.
Okay.
Right? That's
ahead.
never a good situation.
So we were having a similar conversation earlier, right? About the idea of wearing the mask or masking versus filtering, right? Where, as you said, when you come in the door, there are parts of yourself you leave at the door because you know that in order for me to show up and be successful in this place, this is what I'm going to let shine from my personality, from my skill set, from my makeup completely, right? And that doesn't mean that you then have shame or guilt or any negative feelings associated with those things so you hold them back. It's I'm going to put forth what's going to help me be productive and successful in this environment because that's how to best promote me, and they don't deserve all of me. I'm going to give them as much of me as I want to, and I filter in that way.
That's right, yeah. One of my best friends is an HR professional, talks about work-life integration as opposed to work-life balance.
Right.
We're never going to be in full equilibrium, right?
Sure.
So the reason I like the work-life integration term has become more popular now, is that you can integrate all those parts of your personality, your persona, the filter, all of those things, right, into being able to be successful in whatever space you find yourself.
Yeah. So this conversation's bothered me a little bit. Come on, brother. This is bothering me.
Come on, brother.
Right? We did so many aspects. And we've got the clock off the side, but I'm telling the producer now we're gonna go past this clock because I've got some things we need to unpack. A couple things, right? The first is, so I want to challenge both of you in this notion of leaving things at the door, right? And I think I know what you mean when you say that, but I want people, because what I don't want people to do who are watching or listening to feel like they have to, and I use this word, right, contort themselves to be something they're not, right? So again, I know what you guys mean. So I'm challenging in knowing what you mean. But what I want to make sure people hear in terms of being successful in these halls of corporate America is I don't think it's so much about leaving parts of yourself at the door. And it's not that they don't deserve. It's just that what parts of your personality do you need to lean into to be successful in that environment? And there are parts of, to use your parlance, you left at the door that you may have to bring sometimes that you look, if we look at a volume dial and 0 is the lowest and 10 is the highest, maybe it's a 2 of that personality.
Sure.
Because I will tell you, like I've been in situations, right, that or later in my career where it served me well to call people on their shit.
Sure.
Right. And that might be, and I might do it in a way that might be reminiscent of the hood that I grew up in.
Yeah.
Be like, listen, motherfucker. What you need to understand about this is I'm not going to let you disrespect me in this way. Right. So I just want people to understand that it's not that you are leaving parts of yourself at the door. As you're saying, what do I need to call on?
Yeah.
In a moment when that's what it's called for.
So let's stay in your metaphor of the volume.
Yeah.
I see it as you have a volume control, but on that display panel, you also have a treble control, a bass control, and a mid-range control. You're playing music for an audience. Does that audience want more treble? More bass? They want clearer mid-range? You have all of those tools.
Sure.
It's about which of these things, to use the language from earlier, am I going to amplify to better connect with the audience? Because I'm all of those things. I am bass, I am treble, I am mid-range, I am volume. It's not when we say leave it at the door, it's a misnomer.
Right.
It's
That's right.
I don't need to give you all of myself
Right. Absolutely.
at any given time.
Now, only thing I will say is it's not about what they want, it's what they need, right? In the words of Steve Jobs, sometimes they don't know what they need.
Right.
Right.
That's fair.
Right.
Right. So, yeah.
Well, let me. Yeah, I'm glad you're pushing back because I don't want anybody to misunderstand. Right. This is because remember I said you always have to be authentic.
Yes.
You have to be your authentic self, and everything you do has to comport with your personality,
are,
with
right.
who you really are.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
because you'll be miserable if you don't do that.
Right. There you go.
When I say leave stuff at the door, what I'm trying to communicate is the fact of a for-profit, or even a not-for-profit corporate life, right, is that they have to be single-minded about one thing. And the one thing they're single-minded about is their for-profit business. They have to deliver it for the shareholders. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for everybody who's an employee of that enterprise, whether we like it or not, whether we like it or not, when you walk in the door, you are there for the purpose of delivering on that company's objectives.
That's the contract.
That's
you
the
signed.
contract.
That is the contract you sign, but I don't know if I sign up for that is a single-minded thing, right? And so I'm now a newly minted entrepreneur over the past few years, right? And I don't believe in growth for growth's sake.
They believe in growth.
Growth, but not for its own sake.
Right. But use a different term. You have to make a profit.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But what I will say to that, though, and I like where we're going with this. Now we're getting passionate about this thing. But what I will say is, and I'm learning this, right, is that you have to believe in what you are doing.
Absolutely.
Right? Especially as an entrepreneur, right? And I fully understand that when we are successful in our endeavor, there are going to be people who work in our organization who aren't going to have that passion.
That's right.
I fully grasp that.
Absolutely.
But as I'm building this thing, I want to be passionate about that thing that we were doing, and then to the best of my ability, try to permeate that passion throughout the organization. Again, there's going to come a time when that passion is going to cap out, and yes, we're going to have to be really laser focused about the product we build. But what I will say is I see a lot of organizations go wrong, and I'm again newly minted entrepreneur, only 4 years old in this endeavor. But I think a lot of organizations go wrong when they lose sight of that.
100%. I'm putting this in black and white terms.
Yeah.
It's
And
very
that's fine.
nuanced.
That's fine.
For a point, to make my
absolutely.
point.
But
right?
I want people to hear this.
But I think it's
dialogue.
true, right? Because I mean, there were. Look, if you work in this company and you had a death in the family, you're not leaving that at the door when you walk in,
Right.
right? You're walking in with that burden,
Yeah.
and your bosses, your coworkers, you look for them to come alongside you. That's why companies have bereavement, and paternity,
Yes.
right? Because they understand that the whole person comes into the building,
Yeah.
right? But what I'm talking about is when something gets in the way of what the company wants.
Sure.
Right? Let's just use an extreme example. If you have a bereavement situation, right? I forget how long they give you, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever.
Right.
But if 3 months later, 6 months later, you're still mourning and you can't perform,
Well, yeah.
right? And again, that's another extreme example.
Yeah, it's extreme. But yeah.
Right? At some point, somebody's going to take a decision.
Yeah.
Right.
It happened to me.
Right?
It happened to me.
So that's the best companies, and Malik, this more than any because of what you're a people HR practitioner. But the best companies are the ones that can help employees be their whole selves when they come in.
I would agree.
Right.
I would agree. I don't know if you were gonna jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that is for people to top of mind that we can talk about what the best companies do, what you would do as your company grows, what I will do with my company as it grows, and the culture that we will create.
Culture.
Right? But it's important to understand the culture of the company
That's right.
that you're working in, to understand what the goals are, right? You know, are they primarily for profit? Are there other major drivers for them? To understand that framework, and then understand how you can fit as authentically as possible within that framework.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And if you don't fit,
Yes.
you need to find yourself somewhere else
figure
before
something
they
out.
find you somewhere else,
Yes. Yes.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
because that's a collision course.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that was a good conversation. I'm glad we kind of delved deep, and thank you, producers, for letting me kind of go in that direction. I think having said that, I do want to kind of try to round us out and start bringing us to a close. And with that, there are a couple questions we like to ask at the end, and then we have a little bit of a surprise for you.
Okay.
So the first question I will ask is, love to get your opinion on the thought that the black man, and this is global, is perceived as a beast in the world.
I think that perception is probably most developed here in this country. You know, I don't remember when I was growing up that was an issue. You know, I mean, chauvinism is a thing, right? And some people call one thing chauvinism that in some cultures might not be chauvinism, right? So that is what it is. But, you know, for me, I think what it comes down to is, in spite of personalities, right? Whatever, instead of whatever the personality is, if a black man treats others, other men, women, kids, whatever, with respect, the personality doesn't really, you know, negates that, right? And I think the sort of, put aside some of the racially driven, you know, black men are beasts kind of thing, right? But in spite of all of that, if a man, I believe, and this is what I try to teach my son, if a black man treats other people with respect, they're less likely to be called a beast. Right? Because if I understand the term the beast correctly, it's the angry black man, you know, kind of saw. And you know, that's a whole episode.
Right. And it's your definition. It's not any definition that it's there's no wrong or right answer.
But I would say, you know, if you're struggling with, you know, that thing, sort of, you know, turn inward and look at the mirror and ask yourself, do I fit the beast, you know, tag? Right. And be honest with yourself, right? If it fits, then yeah, there are things to do. Get help, right? Figure out how not to be a beast, right?
You know what? And there's something so this is an instance where I do want to kind of double back on something, because you just said something, and what I learned is that you just started your journey in therapy.
I did.
So before we close, right, I really would love for you to spend some time on what, you know, so because you said it's recent. So how do you get to this point in your life and make that determination? Like, what says, you know what, I need help, and therapy might be the way?
For me, it was a catastrophic illness, right? So I was diagnosed with cancer Well, I've had cancer twice.
Okay.
Right. First time diagnosed in 2016, went through that treatment, and then again at the end of 2022. And this time the treatments were a lot more intense, right? So for the end of fourth quarter of 22, all the way through probably the first half of 23, I was in treatment and recovering from treatment. And that took a lot more out of me than I at first thought, right? It had it's almost like it's trauma.
Yeah.
It's physical trauma, but it's also mental and emotional trauma. Just coming out of that and dealing with, you face your mortality in a way that, most people talk about but don't face, and phase of breaking down of your body and all those that you always took for granted, right? And I got to a place where I was with my oncologist one time and I was just angry. I was doing the why me, I eat right, I exercise a lot, I do this, I do that, blah, 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 blah. And she was the one who recommended, I think you're doing well, I am doing well,
Good.
I am
Good to hear.
I'm in remission. But I wasn't doing well. So they put me in touch with the psychiatrist at Winship Cancer Center. And then through that, my psychiatrist/psychologist, gave me the tools for how to go find a therapist. Because that's the biggest challenge. I had no idea how to go do that.
Yeah.
Right. And I think most people feel the same way, right? If you say, okay, I want to get a therapist. Okay. What next?
Right.
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 So, she gave me the tools, gave me the website, Psychology Today, and, you go in and there are filters and you can and I found a therapist that I started working with last fall. It has been great because we've gone past my emotional needs coming out of cancer treatment to digging into some areas that, my parents, growing up, I look forward to, I see him every 2 weeks, we talk for an hour, and I look forward to it. It's a place to go and have conversations that you probably won't have with your wife. Could you get that from a friend? Sure, you can get that from a friend. But professionals have a way of asking certain questions, poking on certain...
Getting you to do certain exercises that make you think.
Right.
Without judgment.
Without judgment, right? And that's the value I found of it. When I said this to Malik recently, he said, "Well, how'd you get to this place in your life without, having had therapy?" I don't know. I've some of it is just you learn, you grow, you have faith. I whatever it is that I am or have, some of it I attribute to being a person of faith and having God in my life. Therapy is, my whole family, I'm sure when they hear this, they'll just chuckle because they're all believers, right? My wife's a big believer. My kids, have all done it, still do. But I was the only holdout, if you will. Because I grew up, therapy was not a thing when I was growing up, right? And not in the environment I grew up in Ghana was not, I probably still isn't a thing,
It's not in the Caribbean.
Right, So the whole notion of mental health was stigmatized because, people who had mental health problems were sick people.
Right.
That was so to admit that you have a mental health, and this is, we all have, it's at one level or the other, right? We all have mental health
Absolutely.
thing, right? You know,
Absolutely.
And so to admit that you have a mental health situation and you need help is where it starts. So for me, it was hitting a wall, and the wall was healthcare,
Got it.
right? And to get over that wall, I needed the professional to get me over the wall. Right? Now, for others, it may not be a health situation, right?
Right.
It may be a relationship situation. It may be a family situation. It could be a career situation. It's whatever the situation is that brings you to that wall. And you can't scale that wall until you get somebody who knows what they're talking about. Yes, don't isolate yourself. Reach out to your friends and your family, whatever it is, whatever your support network is, you should take advantage of that. But your support network, unless there's somebody in that support network who's actually a professional.
Right.
But even that, the
Even
closeness,
then, yes.
you want that dispassionate third party, right?
Yeah.
But when you hit that wall, one, you got to recognize that you've hit a wall. And two, you also have to recognize that the only way to scale that wall
Is with help.
is with help.
For me, it was a nervous breakdown.
Well,
Yep.
there you go. Right?
So I get it.
Yeah. And when you have a nervous breakdown, wife, kids,
And everybody feels it.
everybody feels it, right? But they can't help you.
No. And it's funny to hear you say that, because that was a sticking point for my wife and I. She tried everything she knew to try and help me. And when I started therapy was when I then found the words to say, all I need you to do is listen.
Yeah,
There's nothing you can do to really help.
that's right.
And I can only imagine how that made her feel.
That's right.
But it was the truth.
It was the truth.
And I was just like, I don't need you to show up any other way than just to listen.
That's right.
Whew.
right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I really
thank you.
appreciate
Thanks
that.
for asking.
So now, final question. What in this world makes you feel loved?
What makes me feel loved? Wow. Having my family around me. We've been, like I said earlier, my wife and I have been married for 37 years. 3 wonderful children, our first grandchild.
Oh, nice.
And, like every other couple, we've had, mostly great times. But, we're 2 individuals, right? There have been times where we've hit rough patches and, we needed help. So I've had that kind of therapy, right?
Yeah.
This is my first individual therapy. So that has happened. But bar none, there's nothing that makes me feel just the benefit and the wonderfulness of all of those years is when everybody's around. When now these days it's holidays, right? So this Christmas, everybody was there, right? My wife, my daughter and her husband and our little grandbaby and the other 2 kids and my wife and all of us, and and I remember one time I didn't say anything, but I came into the room one day and just seeing everybody around the table, sitting on the floor and all of that stuff, and I just had this, wow.
Yeah.
That's my, when I'm gone,
That's your legacy.
that's my legacy,
Yeah.
Nice.
right?
So,
Philip, I've never lied to you except once.
Okay.
I
Can't wait to
lied,
hear this.
I lied to you recently because I told you I needed to reach out to your wife, Pam, so
Right.
that she could help me with your intro to the podcast.
Okay.
She did not help me with your intro to the podcast.
Okay.
What she helped me with was composing a letter, which we asked all of the close folks to our guests to do, which is tell us about their witness of your emotional journey.
Wow.
So she put together a letter in alignment with that. After asking several questions, being very thorough, Pam's very thorough, all right?
She is that.
Making sure that, she both completed the assignment, but was being very mindful of how private you are. So we think that this kind of toes the line well. So she writes, and let me take off my glasses so I can see. First, I want to thank you, Malik, for the invitation to affirm my husband's journey, at least from my perspective as his partner in life, since we married in 1987. It's a tremendous thing for anyone, and especially anyone as strong and private as Philip, to peer into mirrors and allow others to peer into them. While I can't speak for him, it's safe to say that there's been a journey. Coming from a very different culture, where I remember he told me in our early years that counseling just wasn't a thing people would really do. I'm proud of him for being willing to take a journey in that direction, period, and allowing for that in his life now and here. Having dealt with a life-altering diagnosis, and not one but two occurrences, I'm exceedingly grateful that he's embraced professionals who can speak to the mental maintenance required to help process such big events, their ramifications and effects, and for a thriving life and relationships in general. Kofi, parenthetically Philip, thank you for sharing yourself with others in this interview and podcast. And thank you for your tenacity in exercising every means you know to promote your health and life. From the physical discipline and determination you've modeled for decades, to the extension of yourself into professional conversations around things that have challenged you and things that matter to you. I know our kids also value mental health work immensely, and we all have great respect for journeys like this and how much they take sometimes. Modeling that willingness, especially to our kids and to a son, is huge. I'm grateful and proud that you've chosen that work. Love you for the rest of our lives, Pam. What's coming up for you, brother?
I'm not surprised that you said any of that.
Yeah.
But you asked a question, what makes you feel loved? Mm-hmm. You know, to hear her say it, even though you read it, means the world, right? Because I wasn't doing that. Honestly, if I were just to break it down for my family, I was doing it for my health.
Yeah.
But it's also for the family. That's the beauty of mental health, right?
Yeah.
It's you know, the shadow of a leader. And to the extent that the father is a leader of the family, one of the two leaders of the family, we cast a long shadow.
Yeah.
Right? And the shadow could go both ways. You know? And so that's the answer to the question you asked me.
That's why we ask it.
That's the answer to the question you asked me. It's for me, but it's for the four people, now six, my granddaughter and my son-in-law, the six most important people to me.
Yeah.
Right. And to know that, this is of great value to them is, in no words. Thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you. And with that, we're out.